On April the 27th, 2019, Seattle's South Lake Union, a booming tech hub and fast-growing neighborhood, was rocked by a tragedy. A construction crane collapsed onto Mercer Street in the middle of a busy Saturday afternoon, destroying everything in its path and killing 4 people within seconds. At first, it seemed like a freak accident, a moment of terrible misfortune. But the truth was far worse. This wasn't just a collapse of steel under strain. It was a collapse of oversight, accountability, and basic safety. The tragedy was entirely preventable. This is the story of the Seattle crane collapse. Just north of downtown Seattle, South Lake Union was once an unremarkable patchwork of warehouses, parking lots, and aging industrial sites. But within a decade, it transformed into one of the fastest growing tech districts in the country. It started with Amazon. In 2007, Amazon planted its headquarters there, and the neighborhood's fate was rewritten. What followed was a wave of investment and ambition. Construction cranes became as common as coffee shops. Glass towers rose where garages once stood. Entire blocks were levelled and reborn, not gradually, but at full throttle. Amid the hum of jackhammers and the rhythm of concrete mixers, ironworkers formed the quiet backbone of the boom. Rain or shine, high above the city, they bolted beams and built skylines. Men like Andrew Yoder and Travis Corbett traded military service for steel and resolve, helping raise the very skeletons of Seattle's future. Mercer Street, nearly 2 miles long and carrying over 38,000 vehicles each week, had become one of the busiest arteries in Seattle's newly supercharged tech district. It was the front line of the city's vertical growth, and in 2016, Google joined the surge. The tech giant announced it would relocate from Fremont and build a bold 6-story campus right on Mercer, one that would dwarf its Kirkland offices. For those in the trades, it meant steady work. The project promised solid wages, reliable hours, and a chance to leave their mark, to build something permanent in a city constantly being reshaped. Construction began in 2017, with completion targeted for 2019. Tower cranes rose into the skyline, assembled, operated, and eventually dismantled by the same skilled workforce that had built countless others. But in the race to push Seattle higher, something critical was overlooked. A step skipped, a warning dismissed, a corner quietly cut. And on a clear Saturday afternoon in April 2019, the very crane that helped raise this symbol of progress came crashing down. The day began like any other workday for Andrew and Travis. They arrived early, as they always did, lacing up their boots, grabbing their gear, and heading towards the crane that had become a fixture of the skyline. That day, the 300-foot crane was coming down. After years of planning and months of hard labour, the project was nearing its final chapter. On Saturday, April the 27th, the crew was tasked with one of the most critical steps: dismantling the tower crane that had loomed over Mercer Street throughout the build. It was supposed to be an everyday operation. The team had done it many times before. Andrew and Travis were experienced, methodical, and trusted with a job that was dangerous but standard procedure. What they couldn't see, what no one saw, was the hidden weakness growing inside the crane. A quiet flaw, a fatal oversight, and it was about to change everything. It was a bright sunny morning and the disassembly was on schedule. The jib was gone, the counterweight and counterjib already removed, and what remained was the heart of the machine, the slewing ring and the operator's cab where Andrew and Travis were still stationed. It was at this point the workers pulled several pins and sleeves from the mast to help speed up progress and to aid the cab's removal. However, the anemometer spiked to 20 miles per hour, which is higher than that particular crane's safety limit of 13.5 miles per hour, so the operation was suspended until the wind eased. Then at approximately 3:28 p.m, everything changed. A sudden gust, stronger than expected, struck the partially dismantled crane. With critical structural components already removed, the mast couldn't withstand the force, and it buckled. Within seconds, the massive steel tower came crashing down. One section slammed into the roof of the very Google building it had helped construct. The rest plummeted across Mercer Street, slicing through the air and crushing everything in its path. 6 vehicles were hit, some left mangled beyond recognition, and the scene descended into chaos. What people witnessed that day would stay with them long after the sirens faded. One witness recalled with horror, "It was terrifying. I looked up and the wind was blowing really strong. Half the crane was falling into the building, the other half just dropped onto the street. It was like watching something in slow motion, except there was no time to react." 4 lives were lost. Andrew Yoder and Travis Corbett died as they fell from the cab, their final moments spent high above the street doing the job they were trained for. Sarah Wong, a 19-year-old freshman at Seattle Pacific University, was riding in a car when the crane came down. She had no idea the crane above would collapse in a matter of seconds. Alan Justad, a 71-year-old retired city planner, was also in traffic on Mercer Street when his vehicle was struck. Both of them died on impact. 4 others were injured. Mercer Street, one of the busiest roads in Seattle, was shut down for the weekend as investigators and emergency crews worked through the wreckage, searching for answers and securing what was left. What began as an average Saturday shift ended in one of the deadliest crane collapses in Washington state history. And it would soon become clear that this tragedy was not just devastating, it was entirely preventable. Many people witnessed it happen, and while some froze in shock, others ran to help. Eyewitness Holly Kirchner was just around the corner when the crane fell. She arrived at the scene within moments. "The sound came first. I heard a crash, like thunder, and then chaos. Sirens, more than I've ever heard at once. I knew something had come down. I saw a massive chunk of the crane. It looked like it had landed on a few cars. Just a complete mess. The collapse wasn't just an accident. It was a catastrophe witnessed in real time by dozens, and its shockwaves were felt across the entire city." Crane collapses of this magnitude are exceedingly rare in the United States, making this one of the deadliest and most preventable in recent memory. So what caused the collapse? At first, the blame fell on the weather. Wind gusts had reached over 45 miles per hour that afternoon, and many assumed the stormy conditions had brought the crane down. It seemed like a reasonable explanation. But a 6-month investigation by the Washington Department of Labor and Industries uncovered something far more troubling. The crane had not been dismantled according to the manufacturer's instructions. In direct violation of standard safety procedures, workers had prematurely removed more than 50 structural pins that were critical to securing the crane's mast sections. They did this to save time, but without them, the structure was fatally compromised. When the winds hit, it didn't stand a chance. And while the removal of those pins was the immediate trigger, it pointed to broader systemic problems in how crane disassembly is approached. Tower cranes require frequent assembly and disassembly, which makes proper bolt torque absolutely critical for safety and performance. Each bolt has a specific torque value, and it is the responsibility of the crane owner or contractor to ensure every one is tightened to that value using a calibrated torque wrench. Given the complexity of these cranes, multiple types of torque wrenches may be used: hydraulic, electric, manual, or pneumatic, depending on the bolt sizes and locations. But more important than the type of wrench is whether it's been calibrated to a traceable standard. Tools calibrated by an ISO or IEC 17025 accredited laboratory carry certification verifying that their measurements meet international standards. This provides traceability, accountability, and assurance, ensuring every bolt was tightened with the accuracy that safety demands. Removing all the pins in the way that the Seattle crews did on the day of the collapse is not unusual. Stephen Fryen, lead crane instructor at West Coast Training in Woodland, Washington, said at the time of the collapse, "They used it as a time shortcut," he said, "and sometimes it doesn't work out. But it's totally against manufacturers' specifications and recommendations about how to take cranes apart." 3 companies were ultimately found responsible and fined. The negligence of GLY Construction, which leased the crane, was found not to have contributed to the deaths and injuries of the plaintiffs in the case, but was cited for failing to provide qualified supervision during the disassembly process. According to court documents, the jury assigned 45% of the blame to Northwest Tower Crane Services, who failed to ensure workers were properly trained and adhering to safety protocols. 30% was assigned to mobile crane subcontractor Omega Morgan, and 25% to Morrow Equipment, the crane owner, who had approved the premature removal of the pins, a decision that directly contributed to the collapse. The jury damages were in addition to a $107 million fine levied by the Washington State Department of Labor and Industries in the case, illustrating how accidents on construction sites can have ramifications far beyond just complying with safety rules. The conclusion was devastating. This was no accident. The collapse was entirely preventable. In the aftermath of the collapse, state regulators moved swiftly to tighten oversight of crane disassembly procedures across Washington. What had once been considered routine now came under intense scrutiny as agencies re-examined safety standards, enforcement practices, and the human cost of cutting corners. All 4 victims of the crane collapse have now been publicly identified, each with a life cut short and a story that should have continued. One of them was Alan Justad, a 71-year-old retired city planner and long-time public servant. He has spent decades helping shape Seattle's urban landscape. Mayor Jenny Durkan described him as loyal and honourable, someone who made a lasting impact on the city. He was driving down Mercer Street when the crane came down. 2 others were ironworkers, Travis Corbett and Andrew Yoder, both seasoned professionals trusted with one of the most dangerous jobs in construction. Travis Corbett, 33, had recently settled in Oregon with his wife. They had been married for just under a year and were planning their honeymoon. His death brought a heartbreaking end to a future only just beginning. His wife, Samantha Corbett, later said, "I know he would want me to be strong. I want him back because he was the best partner I could ask for, and I'll never find someone like him. We were the best match for each other, and it saddens me and angers me that he's gone and I'll have to do it without him." Andrew Yoder, 31, was a husband and father of 2 young sons. Known for his dedication and quiet strength, Andrew took deep pride in his work and deeper pride in his role as a father. His family remembers him as a steady, kind, and deeply loved person. The 4th victim was Sarah Wong, a 19-year-old freshman at Seattle Pacific University, full of promise and energy. Sarah was planning to study nursing and lived on campus. In the days that followed, her friends and classmates leaned on one another in grief, struggling to process the sudden loss of someone so young. Seattle Pacific University released a statement saying, "We are deeply saddened to confirm that one of our students passed away in the crane accident in Seattle on April the 27th. While we grieve the sudden and tragic loss of our precious student, we draw comfort from each other, our strong community of faith, and God's presence during this time of sorrow. We ask that the community join us in praying for Sarah's family and friends." In March of this year, following a wrongful death lawsuit, a King County jury awarded more than $112 million in damages to the families of those killed on the ground and the individuals injured in the Seattle crane collapse. The court was clear. This was not a freak accident. It was the result of serious, avoidable failures. Of the total award, the Wong family received $54 million. The Justad family was awarded $39 million. The remaining funds were distributed among 3 individuals who were injured in the collapse, 2 of whom were in the car with Sarah. Travis Corbett and Andrew Yoder fell to their deaths. Their families were not plaintiffs in this case and filed separate claims. 4 lives were lost, lives filled with love, ambition, service and potential. Andrew Yoder, Travis Corbett, Alan Justad and Sarah Wong. They weren't just names in a news report. They were fathers, husbands, daughters and public servants. This tragedy didn't have to happen, and that's what makes it so haunting. It's a reminder that when safety is treated like a checkbox and responsibility is passed around like paperwork, the cost is paid in lives. Let their names be remembered, not just for how they died, but for the change that their loss demands. for a culture of safety that isn't optional, for accountability that isn't delayed, for a future where no one has to lose their loved one because someone skipped a step. The lesson left behind isn't just about bolts and blueprints. It's about vigilance, integrity, and remembering that every safety protocol exists to protect a life. The crane is gone, but the weight of what happened still lingers over Seattle. And it should. Of course, this was a very distressing story, and our condolences go out to those who lost their lives, their families, and the people that knew them, and also the families of those who were injured. Despite all of this, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you on the next one, and I'll thank you for watching and say bye-bye for now.